the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation appreciates this opportunity to raise following issues and recommendations. First, military sexual slavery represents crimes against humanity with no statutory limitations. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women in her reports and the Subcommission and the Commission on Human Rights in their resolutions called on the Japanese government to acknowledge legal responsibility for the Japanese military sexual slavery of 200,000 people, bring perpetrators to justice and compensate to the victims. The CEDAW and the Committee Against Torture in 2003 and 2007 expressed serious concerns and recommended solutions. This was followed by parliaments of many countries like the United States, the Netherlands, and the European Parliament, which adopted resolutions calling on Japan to address the problem. Unfortunately, the problem still remains unresolved. We recommend Japan to take concrete measures to address once and for all the Japanese military sexual slavery and other violations committed in the past in other countries, including Korea. Second, the UN Special Rapporteur on Racism concluded that there are discriminations against the Koreans in Japan in the areas of political participation, employment, housing, marriage, health and education. The Human Rights Committee, the CEDAW and the Child Rights Committee also expressed concerns on the enforced change of the Korean names into Japanese, the refusal to recognize Korean schools and the inequalities of the Koreans for higher education institutions. We recommend Japan to take measures to eliminate all discriminations against the Koreans. Finally, Mr. President, we are concerned at continued distortion of the history in Japan, since this is indicative of the refusal to address the past violations and of the danger of its recurrence, and therefore we recommend immediate measures to address the situation as also called for by the UN Special Rapporteur on Racism. I thank you, Mr. President.
The distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, the Chinese delegation would like to thank the Japanese delegation headed by Mr. Ambassador Yashitaka Akimoto for its presentation, and we appreciate the importance attached by the Japanese government to the UPR. The Chinese delegation welcomes the moves taken by the Japanese government to promote and protect human rights, including the promotion of human rights education among civil servants and at schools, the implementation of comprehensive legal support, and the increasing the number of lawyers. To promote the human rights of women, children, elderly, disabled, and leprosy patients, the Japanese government has adopted measures against child abuse and child pornography, increased human rights counseling for the vulnerable groups, and adopted preferential treatment for them in employment and welfare. It has also worked to raise the general awareness of the whole society on the need to protect those vulnerable groups. All these are praiseworthy measures. We have also noticed that the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, CEDAW, the Committee Against Torture, and several NGOs have all mentioned in the report some historical issues. The Special Rapporteur on Racism has requested the Japanese government to eliminate racial discrimination and xenophobia. My delegation hopes that the Japanese government will seriously address those concerns and adopt effective measures to implement the recommendations of those rapporteurs. Thank you, Mr. President.
The distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation would like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Japan, headed by His Excellency Mr. Yoshitaka Akimoto, and thank them for both a thorough national report and an informative presentation. Over the years, Japan has achieved a high standard of human rights enjoyment for its people. We appreciate the efforts made by the Japanese government to enhance the promotion and protection of human rights in Japan. In particular, we note with satisfaction the recent ratification of ILO conventions relating to the abolition of child labor, the adoption of a basic plan for gender equality, and various other legislative developments, such as those aimed at combating trafficking, and also those related to the recognition of refugees. Furthermore, my delegation commends Japan's efforts to promote development and human rights worldwide through the provision of significant financial contributions and technical cooperation. In addition, we welcome the pledges made by the Japanese government to continue to contribute in such ways. Mr. President, taking this opportunity, we would like to touch upon 3 issues. Firstly, the UN human rights mechanisms, including the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and the Committee Against Torture, have expressed their concerns over the issue of comfort women during the Second World War. They consider that this matter has not been adequately addressed by the Japanese government and have accordingly made recommendations to Japan on this matter. We call on the Japanese government to respond sincerely to the recommendations of the UN human rights mechanisms and request the Japan delegation to elaborate on the current status of implementation of the recommendations as well as their plans for future actions in this regard. Secondly, we appreciate continuous efforts by Japan to create a society free of discrimination through education programs and various awareness-raising activities. However, we note with concern the conclusion of the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism in 2005 that racial discrimination and xenophobia do exist in Japan, in particular against 3 groups, including the Korean minority. In order to promote the rights and the interests of minority groups in Japan, as well as to eliminate discrimination against them, we look forward to further efforts by Japan. Finally, Mr. President, noting the recommendation in the UN report regarding the revision of history textbooks, we would like to emphasize the importance of correct history education in Japan, which is a crucial factor in fostering future-oriented relations with the neighboring countries. Thank you, Mr. President.